Crying on cue. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. Oh, and before we get into the topic, I do want to offer a warning out to you, especially if you're a subscriber of this channel for a long time. After 4 years of doing videos pretty much every week for free, we are likely moving to a membership type situation here on YouTube. Turns out that investing hours per week into these videos doesn't exactly pay off when the ad revenue is only a couple pennies here and there. We had hoped to organically grow this channel like our friend Kurt Yu has grown his, but we just aren't experts in this sort of thing, and we didn't want to be icky in how we tried to grow this channel. So we're toying with this idea of adding a membership option. There will still be content that we would release for free every month. It's just that we would start to reserve some of the better stuff for the members. So stay tuned for that. And now on to our topic, crying on cue. This topic comes up every now and then. Sometimes when I'm taping an actor, sometimes when I'm teaching a class. Most recently, someone who reached out to me privately on a previous video topic asking me to cover this one. And if you are currently or have lived under the burden of having to be able to cry on cue, I have a few things to say about it. First, you must understand the progress of a story from script to screen. I remember a first AD was addressing everyone, cast and crew on the set at, I think it was day one of filming. And he said the following: when you make a story, you make it 3 times. When you write it, when you shoot it, and when you edit it. It's why if you take a popular movie and search online for the script, you could end up finding 2 versions, a transcript and a shooting script, or some other name. The transcript is just someone having watched the movie and written down every word of dialogue, maybe adding in some stage directions. The shooting script, on the other hand, is presumably what the director and the actors work with day to day on set. Nowadays, on many productions, even that shooting script is being rewritten as the production continues to unfold. So it's very common that if you find that shooting script, it doesn't line up with what you are seeing in the finished product. This can be due to improv or the director or writers rewriting as they go. It could be reshoots with new dialogue, or in the editing room, they could be removing dialogue or adding new lines with ADR, etc. Wait, how does this relate to crying on cue? I'm getting there. Jeez. The point is, the script you received for your audition bears only a passing resemblance to what will be shot on the day. So can you feel my first point coming? You don't have to feel locked into what those stage directions say. That was the writer's vision as they sat in a coffee shop and tried to imagine what was going to look best in the scene. They also needed to convince the suits who have the money and ultimately greenlight the project or approve the script. They had to convince those suits of what this was going to look like on the day. So they have to get descriptive. But again, it's just that singular vision when they're sitting there in front of their computer screen. It's not the end all be all of what has to be shown on screen. Oh, and please don't think that what I'm saying is that you can rewrite the script in your audition. No, don't. That writer worked tirelessly on endless drafts of that script just to get it to the point to where it is when you receive it. Do not disrespect that writer by saying it your way or adding your no doubt genius ad-libs. So anyways, just because the stage directions say she cries or he weeps quietly doesn't mean you have to do it. Now, if the other character's next line of dialogue is, "Hey, stop crying," or "Hey, are you crying?" well, then you're backed into a corner a little bit more. But it takes me to my next point. Some people are bad criers. And I don't just mean that some people are ugly criers or funny criers, but more broadly, it speaks to your essence as a human being. In the Sam Christensen workshop, we talk about what your fans want to see you do on screen, and by extension, what they don't really care to see you do on screen. In other words, when you show up on screen in a scene as your fan, as the audience, what part of humanity am I expecting you to show? What part of the human condition do you own in a way that draws me in? What are those universal emotions and behaviors that when you exhibit them, it moves me? Boom. Now, if you've not done a workshop like the Sam Christensen image process, you may have no idea. In which case, check the show notes below for a link to sign up for our free preview event for the Sam Christensen image process this Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. It's over Zoom, and the link to RSVP is below. If you're watching this after August 28th, 2024, still check the show notes because there are some evergreen links down there that will get you more information. Because this information is a game changer for any actor. You may come to realize that you will never be hired to cry. Oh, it's me. I'm not saying I can't cry or that I never will cry in a role on screen, but what I am saying is that if the movie poster shows me crying, you're not going to buy a ticket. Now, if I'm the lead and my character goes through a really complex arc, then eventually part of that arc might lead me to a vulnerable place where you see me produce tears. And hopefully it will be riveting. But if I'm playing the dad in a crime procedural who just can't understand how this could have happened to my baby girl, then I will not book the job if it's crucial to the production that I'm a good crier. And by good crier, again, I mean someone who can cry on cue and that it's something that the audience actually wants to watch. Because that's not what I've been called to show you and the rest of humanity. There are many other actors that have that calling, just not me. No, I'm the stoic husband who keeps it together, stays strong, while his poor emotional wife loses it at the precinct. Maybe to the point where the detectives even think that I might be involved. You see what I'm getting at? This actually might be controversial to some of you out there. Because some of you are taught that if you are to be a good actor, then you must be a chameleon. You must be able to play every role ever written. I wholeheartedly disagree. While I do agree you should endeavor to always be growing, you should have a growth mindset, you should always be training, you should always be endeavoring to broaden your craft and to broaden your experience in life and to be able to tap into more things as an actor. It's just a fact that you're made up of a different set of molecules. You have a different set of life events, traumas, etc. So is it fair to require you to be able to experience and therefore showcase every nuance of the human condition? Well, let's just say if there ever were a human that could reach that point, and it's my contention that it's impossible, it would be overkill. We, the audience, the ones who are paying money to watch this performance, will never ask that from one actor. The good news is we only ever ask you to show a subset of the human experience, the part you're an expert at because you've had a lot of experience with those different emotions and behaviors. So much so that we will pay money to come back time and time again to watch you live and experience those parts of humanity. But I digress. Point is, if you think the script is asking for tears, first ask yourself, does anyone want to see me cry? Chances are, if you're not crying on a regular basis in your real life, if it's not a part of your human experience that is close to you, that is recognizable, that is in some respects routine, then it's probably not going to go so well when you try to do it on screen. And here's my next point. There's nothing special about a salty discharge that comes out of your tear ducts.
What is the matter?
It's Patty.
Jerry, you break up with a girl every week.
What is this salty discharge?
Oh my God, you're crying.
This is horrible. I care.
The physical tears don't often even show up on a self-tape unless you're in real close. I mean, can you even see this water that I'm putting on my face? Not really, right? It just looks like I'm shiny. And spoiler alert, if you just want that salty discharge, buy a cry stick. We have an Amazon affiliate link in the show notes below. Instead of obsessing over the physical act of crying and producing tears, you need to focus on your character analysis, on what is causing the character to cry. You need to get into the head of the writer and why they wrote it this way. Once you get to the bottom of that, you may discover that that same trigger for you, based on your life experience and all of the events in your life and how you navigate this human experience, might lead you to hysteria, fear, anger, or something else. So unpack the actual stimulus instead of focusing on this outcome of tears. Lastly, if you have concluded that you must cry, because maybe there's something in the breakdown that indicates that the producers or the casting director needs an actor who can cry on cue, well, then if you aren't at that point, turn down the audition. Seriously. Because if you're watching this hoping for a quick fix for an audition that's due tomorrow at noon, just stop. Stop trying to figure it out, because that tells me that you're working from a lack mindset, a fear mindset, desperate to please your agent or the casting director or the producers because you got to book this job. And that's just going to load on top of you when you're trying to be vulnerable in this audition. And it's pretty much going to guarantee that you won't get there because you're placing too much pressure on yourself. And it's okay to turn down an audition. And let's say that you don't turn it down and you lock yourself in your bedroom for 30 minutes using whatever prep that might get you to that vulnerable place. And your reader who's in the next room is patiently waiting for you, scrolling mindlessly on IG. And you come out and say, look, hey, let's do it. Let's tape this. And you do a couple takes. You're not quite there. And then you start to feel it on take 3 a little bit. So you're like, let's just roll another one. Take 4 is starting to get good. And by take 10, you got it. It's amazing. You got tears. Your reader is like, wow, yeah, that's the one. And you're feeling good, right? Wrong. That is, I hope you don't book that job. Because if you do, what's going to happen when you're on set with 35 strangers staring at you and the camera's on a dolly and it's slowly pushing in on you and it's so huge in your field of vision such that you can't even look at your co-star for the dialogue. You have to look at a piece of tape on the side of the matte box. Do you really think with all of that distraction, all of that pressure, that you're going to be able to deliver the same way you did on take 10 at home when you were in your safe space with your friend who was a reader? It's just not going to happen. And so by submitting that audition, it's in some ways perpetuating this false idea of what you're capable of, because you didn't cry on cue. You spent a long time trying to get there, and then it still took 10 takes to get to a place where you felt like it was cinematic enough, that it was worthy of submitting. And you just won't be able to recreate that on set with all that pressure. Your tear ducts will be a desert, and then they'll have to use a cry stick. And yes, I keep referencing the cry stick, and they do have those on set for these types of situations. But you should think of it as a last resort for maybe when you're dehydrated. Because if you haven't done the emotional work to connect to that part of your character, then a salty discharge, it's not even going to affect the audience in any way whatsoever. The cry stick is just a physiological trigger. It's just menthol on your lower eyes that causes your tear ducts to well up. But if there is no supporting emotion beneath it, it's empty. But if you feel truly led to play these types of characters, the victims in those crime procedurals, sad characters, weepy characters, etc., then you need to get into an acting class yesterday to start honing your craft so that you will be able to eventually cry on cue. Side note, through that exploration, you may discover that you need therapy either before or in conjunction with that acting class. And speaking of personal trauma, if you've had some personal trauma in your past and you have healed from it, and you find yourself in an acting class where the teacher is trying to make you use substitution of those real past traumatic events to bring forth the emotion, just know you don't have to. You don't have to open up. You don't have to be willing to unlock those past traumas, especially if they're severe. If you don't want to go there, it's okay. And if that teacher yells at you, well, send them my way. I do have a black belt and I can take care of them. Because if that teacher causes you to go to therapy, then they're a bad teacher as far as I'm concerned. There are other ways to get there. For me, improv was the answer. Years of it, by the way. It taught me to be a kid again. And what I mean is, when I was a kid, when I was, let's say, 3 years old, I didn't need any help getting from one emotion to the next. I could be laughing one moment, something could trigger me to start crying the next. Maybe you took my toy, maybe I stubbed my toe. But then as soon as mom held me, everything was fine again. And there didn't seem to be any residual effect of jumping from emotion to emotion, right? So as an adult, if I can tap into that same sense of play, that same sense of imagination, then I can get to so many different emotions very quickly by simply pretending, by just believing in the given circumstances. And the best part about that is when the director yells cut, it's a lot easier for me to shake that off and to reset back to neutral. Whereas if I'm using substitution to bring up some past traumatic event, and I have to do that take after take, maybe day after day, because it's just a character that lives in that space for an entire week of shooting, well, that could send me into a dark place for days, weeks, months afterwards. So personally, I say get into an improv class and stay in improv for a prolonged period of time. But lastly, kind of like the last video where we talked about blinking, I want to give you an emotional hack, if you will, to help you as you prepare for these types of scenes in your self-tapes. And I won't go into too much detail because I can't give everything away for free. I'll just say that you can prime your body for the physiological response of crying. And let me set up my argument this way. Think about the last several times that you've cried, whether it was a single tear, whether it was just a welling up of emotion, or whether it was a full release that lasted for minutes because of something traumatic that happened. And I want you to think about your posture. Think about where you're standing. If you started standing, you probably ended up sitting. If it was really traumatic, you might have lost control and collapsed to the floor. If it was something simpler, like you were watching a television show or a movie that moved you, you might have already been sitting. But then what happened to your body? I guarantee you what didn't happen in that experience, you did not get bigger with your body. You did not suddenly take up more space. You did not establish the victory pose or the Superman pose with arms akimbo on your hips. If anything, you got smaller. Your shoulders started to slump. Your chin started to dip. You started to collapse your chest. If you were sitting, you might have crossed your feet or crossed your arms. You might have gone full fetal position. So if it's appropriate for the scene, start in a more closed-in position, seated if possible. This can start to reinforce the impending trauma for your character. It's sending a subtle signal that as you start to think about and feel differently, as you start to go down into that dark space, your body is already reinforcing this based on all the previous times, all the associations that your body already has with that type of posture. It'll create a feedback loop that will just help you get there faster. Or to say it differently, if you start here or in the Superman pose, or you're just generally taking up a lot of space, it's definitely not helping you get to that vulnerable place. So you might as well remove as many obstacles as possible. This can be especially helpful if the scene starts in that emotional place. You can sit there with your shoulders hunched, your chin down as you go through your previous moment, as you establish yourself in the world of the scene. It can get you there a little bit quicker. Now, if your emotional stuff doesn't come till 3 pages into a 4-page scene, well, that's where you go back to your training. Whether it's improv or any other form of training, you have to have a very robust foundation underneath you so that you can handle these types of emotional loads in the moment when they're thrown at you. When you thought you were shooting the funny scene that day and they decide, nope, we're doing your emotional scene first and we're starting with your close-up. As an actor, as a professional, you need to be ready for that. And you're not going to be ready if you don't practice how you play, if you don't get those reps in the gym, well, in acting class. Because there are no shortcuts and the camera knows what you're truly feeling. And so if you're trying to phone it in, if you're trying to create some sort of cheat or workaround, it'll know. And then the editor will be forced to try to work around your footage. And then you wonder why your amazing scene just seemed to fall flat in the final product. I hope this was helpful. And if you take nothing away from this, then I refer you back to my first couple points, which is to analyze the script and first determine, is it even necessary whatsoever that your character actually cry? Most of the time, you'll have some leeway. But this is where you need to be empowered to bring your signature performance to the script. Again, not changing the dialogue, but how you interpret the dialogue, how you interpret the interaction between the characters. Take ownership of the audition. Take ownership of your career. If not now, when? Drop a comment below if you have any thoughts on the topic. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.